Welcome to the Break the Cycle podcast. On today's episode, we are going to be speaking with Dr. Bonci. Dr. Bonci is a world-renowned neurologist who has multiple practices across the globe. He is offering TMS, or Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation, at these practices for individuals with treatment-resistant issues, specifically depression, and most interestingly, addiction, which we dive into a lot on this episode. We'll identify the root causes of addiction and the interesting fact that they all lead to the prefrontal cortex, which is what TMS really targets. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Bonci.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Anto Bonci. I am a neurologist by training and a neuroscientist. So I spent the last 30 years studying how the brain works when we are stressed or have an addiction to alcohol or cocaine. And I'm the president and co-founder of GIA Miami, GIA Beverly Hills, GIA Chicago, and so on. And if you have questions about TMS, everything you ever wanted to know about TMS, but you never dare to ask me. So you will see today what we're going to talk about.
Amazing. We're going to dive into a game. We're going to play some mental health questions around the world, and let's get it.
Yay.
Team Kyla and Elijah versus Team Bonci and Danny.
And welcome. Seriously, welcome.
Thank you.
Happy to have you. Let's dive in. So we're going to hop in and we're going to play a game on mental health to warm us up. Are we ready to lock in? So we're doing teams. It's going to be Kyla and I.
Hello.
Team EK.
Let's go, Dr. Bonci.
So Dr. Bonci and Danny is on the other couch.
Yes.
All right, we got 60 seconds on the clock for a question. And away we go.
Challenge one. Fight.
Which country has the highest reported suicide rate in the world? Oh, wow. The U.S. is not even on there. That's actually fascinating.
So the options are Japan, South Africa, Russia, and Finland.
So there's this thing called the suicide forest that I heard about from this Logan Paul guy. And I'm going to have to go with, I think, Japan on this one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Japan.
Suicide
Are
forest.
We locked in? You guys got to lock in?
I don't know of any other countries that have a suicide forest.
Okay. Yeah. Japan. I don't know. Is that the correct? Yeah, it's the correct answer. Okay, cool.
Nice.
Okay, next question.
In which country is mental health still considered a taboo subject and seeking therapy is often stigmatized?
So we have the UK, Canada, Brazil, and India.
I think that is probably applicable to all of them, quite frankly, right?
But probably India.
Our biggest following.
Mostly India.
If I had to guess.
Okay. I like that answer. Ooh, Brazil.
Oh, you guys had India. We voted Brazil. You guys voted India. You guys got it. The only thing is our biggest followings in India from our social media.
Okay.
I picked
We're
India.
Our biggest followings in India. Isn't that crazy?
Because of the culture.
Yeah.
The culture. That's what I'm
Maybe
say,
it's the younger
India.
kids, but I'm shocked on the amount.
The parents. They're very traditional.
The amount.
Remember that the biggest city in Brazil is São Paulo, which is the biggest Italian city.
Okay.
So similar culture to Europeans, while India has a completely different idea about mental health.
Okay.
So India is way more stigmatizing mental health than
Good to know.
a European / Italian / Spanish, Portuguese.
So the next clinic is Brazil or India?
Brazil, actually.
No way, is it?
Yes, we are having conversations.
Really?
Yes,
Really?
we are.
Wow.
That's amazing. I'm going to Brazil next month, actually.
There is only one good clinic in Brazil,
Really?
in the university in Rio de Janeiro.
Okay.
Wow.
There is a faculty, Andre Brunoni. I have lots of patients asking from Brazil where they can go. And I mean, Brazil is huge, and there's only one as far as I know.
Wow. Very applicable.
Yeah.
Good job, Layla.
There you
Layla.
There you go.
2 points for Layla.
Yeah. Layla's on the board.
That's awesome.
Okay, next question.
In some parts of the world,
Yes.
depression is seen as a spiritual or personal weakness rather than a medical condition.
True.
We're
You
still
guys are
on
on
top.
trend here.
Let's go.
How do you feel about mental health being seen more spiritual in different parts of the world?
It's everywhere. Even in Italy, people are split. In Europe, I have a lot of patients from Europe, in Italy. It's all over the place. Still kind of certain old generations think of depression and anxiety, just work through it. Even right now, and even young people, for example, in some parts of Italy. So the same. I think it's not in certain nations, but in every nation within certain ages or, let's say, groups.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's everywhere. It's still everywhere.
Yeah. You would say that, Danny.
Yeah. We always used to say like depression is a disease of the soul. Obviously there's physiological and mental implications, but on a spiritual level as well.
Yeah.
Just
Absolutely.
If you don't have if you haven't found a passion or something that is really driving your soul or filling your soul up, it could lead to.
We have seen that a lot, which is one of the few groups of people that we do not see improving, because usually more than 80 to 90% of people improve after TMS, are people that either have no spirituality or religious beliefs whatsoever.
Wow.
Yeah.
You have data on that?
We have lots of experience on that. We have seen that over and over. People that
It's very
either don't
fascinating.
have any kind of spiritual interest in anything, whether it's yoga, Buddhism, anything, right? Those people, or people that don't have a sense of purpose.
Okay.
I have a question for you. Do you think that's why AA is so successful for a lot of people because of
Yes.
the spiritual aspect
Yes.
to it?
Yes,
Interesting.
absolutely.
I'm a recovering addict myself. I was a heroin user. Just a back little information on me. And like, there's always a joke inside. It's like, I started out as a drug addict and now I'm religious. You know what I mean? Because like, you come in and you don't have any like spiritual basis or foundation, and they kind of like work that into you within it. They say it's not religious or spiritual, but it really truly is like the core of it. So that's interesting. I think that's
It is. It is.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the existential crises are more prominent in this day and age as well, just because it's difficult to find a sense of meaning oftentimes, especially what I've heard as well, and I don't know if you have any insight on this, is that suicide rates are higher amongst like trust fund kids because they lack a sense of meaning and purpose, and then that existential dread will kind of snowball, this demise and this depression. So I think there's definitely a correlation there.
I'll willingly take places with the trust fund.
Yeah. I volunteer for you.
Please.
Yeah, but this is a very good point. I recently had a friend of mine in Italy relapsing, and this gentleman that did fantastic with TMS the first time, after a couple of years, he relapsed, like crying. He called me desperate and said, Anton, look, truth is, I was bored. I made 30 million euros this year. My business is very successful.
Good for him.
And I just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with my time. And so lack of purpose, I need to find something else to do because my companies are doing great. What am I going to do next? And to please help me to find that, because otherwise I could do 10 gazillion TMS stimulations a day, but it's going to reduce cravings or whatever, but it's not going to give him a sense of purpose, right? So that missing piece of this person says, I need help for that.
True.
Because otherwise I am bored. I don't know what to do with my time. And cocaine was the answer for this.
Yeah. And what
He
did you
locked into
recommend to him?
cocaine.
What did you recommend? And do you have a sort of life plan or some sort of like sense of structure that you can provide?
We are providing, absolutely. We have a team of therapists that always work with these patients. And finally, he agreed to do that. Initially, he just said, no, I just want to do TMS. I said, no, big mistake. Oh, just trust me. He got better for a year. And then now he's doing therapy as well.
Good.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to do a double approach, if you will, right? The intervention and then supplement it as well with the psychotherapy.
Absolutely, yes.
Amazing.
We always do that when they need it. Never TMS in isolation when we see that, again, there is this lost path to themselves or life. We always want them to do comprehensive approach. Yeah, absolutely, yes.
TMS treats the physiological, and then psychotherapy helps with the spiritual, if you will.
TMS doesn't give you answers on why I'm drinking, why I'm smoking, why I'm snorting cocaine, why I'm gambling my salary. TMS can completely tune down cravings or interest in that, but it doesn't give you answers on why you did it in the first place. That's why it's essential to combine therapy with TMS in, I would say, 90% of our patients with addictions, more than 90% actually.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we're going to dive into all of this. This is all super exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Should we finish up with the game here?
Yeah.
And then
How many questions we got left?
we got like 3. Okay. Question 4.
Which country pioneered mental health parity, ensuring equal coverage? Parity.
Oh, I don't know that.
So we have Norway, New Zealand, France, in the United States?
Okay, it's not the United States. We know that, right?
It's not United States.
I'm going to
bet.
say it's going to be a Nordic country. I would say
Yeah.
it's probably going to be Norway. Quite
Let's go
frankly.
with Norway.
Okay, perfect.
It could be New Zealand as well, but
I think they're
knows?
stealing our answers.
Oh no, the right answer was United States.
What?
What?
Whoa.
Mental health parity?
Really?
I don't even. What's the definition
Ensuring
of parity?
equal coverage, is
it
that like
means equal.
insurance?
Yeah.
I think
Parity.
that's insurance. I think we read it wrong. I think it's equal coverage. So like mental health
Yes.
is now a part of like depression, like mental health, substance
Yeah.
abuse is all covered under health insurance now.
Mm.
I think it was 2008. Obama
Really?
interacted that. Yeah.
Okay.
I was still
Obamacare.
guessing Norway
Yeah, I guess Norway.
because of the Nordic
Yeah.
Yeah.
states
The
are super-
openness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think I read
Interesting.
it too
Okay,
quickly.
well,
Oh, well. We're still ahead.
Fascinating.
Come on, we
We're
can do
still
it.
ahead.
okay, next question.
Which social media platform is both praised and criticized for its impact on mental health? I would say
all
all
of
of them.
Instagram, TikTok, Snap, Twitter.
Oh,
I would
God.
say most prominently, I would say probably TikTok or Twitter.
TikTok probably.
Yeah, how about TikTok?
Maybe it would be TikTok.
I let you choose. You know better than me this stuff.
I mean,
I only have Instagram.
Elijah's the social
I
media
don't
guy.
have
I
Snapchat
would do
or
TikTok.
TikTok.
Okay, let's do.
Which is X
We're
now.
split.
Yeah, I
Doesn't
think
exist
X.
anymore.
I went with X. It was TikTok. Wow.
It was TikTok.
I should have listened to you.
It's
It's okay. We're still in the lead.
You guys are still in the lead. Okay.
No, well, we're still ahead.
Next question.
Which drug linked to overdose deaths is a major issue in the U.S. but less of a concern in many other
Opioids.
countries?
Opioids. Fentanyl.
Fentanyl, yes.
I was like, from experience.
From experience.
I mean, I've never seen
Been there, done
one
that.
case in Italy of
Yeah.
opioid overdose.
All right, last
Really?
question here.
Synthetic opioids.
Wow.
Patients
Where
don't
is
ask-
TMS
That's
widely
fascinating.
accepted as a treatment for depression?
Well, the United States.
The United States.
Yeah.
Finally,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, there you go.
There's one thing about the United States.
Okay, TMS. All right, so then to round it up, we have the winners being.
What are we going to
What?
win?
Okay,
What?
second place.
No, you're
okay.
Oh,
second.
second
Okay,
place.
let's go.
Danny.
Danny,
Doctor.
Dr. Bonci.
Dr. Bonci, let's go.
Yay.
Great job, y'all.
I wouldn't be able to do it without you, Dr. Bonci.
You carried the team,
Likewise.
literally.
I want to thank my parents for getting me here. Lord and Savior.
Amazing. Okay, well, we keep on talking about TMS, right?
Happy.
What the hell is TMS?
What the hell is TMS? TMS is a technology
Okay.
that was invented, and most people don't know this, more than 40 years ago.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Fascinating.
A lot of people think it's alternative, it's experimental,
Yeah.
it's new. TMS was invented, actually officially published, like for the international community in 1985. And was invented because we already knew in 1985 and before that, clinicians already knew that the majority of people struggling with depression don't improve with the traditional medications. And it's about, according to, there's tons of studies on that, but maybe 35-ish% of people do improve with traditional medications, the SSRIs and so on. But the majority of people do not, either because of too many side effects or because simply they don't get better.
Right.
Their depression symptoms don't get better. So clinicians back in the 80s were already asking neuroscientists to create something else. ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, had been already invented since the late 1800s, right? So
Yeah.
we kind of knew already that some form of electrical stimulation could help people, and ECT is still done at major places like Hopkins and so on. And in some people it does help, but TMS was invented with this idea, which is a kind of a pacemaker idea. Was invented with the idea that, and there are studies on that, imaging studies, EEG studies, that when people have depression, there is a part of their brain, it's called the frontal cortex, that has a reduced activity. It's like a heart that beats slower than normal. So the original idea of TMS was like a pacemaker idea. Why don't we bring back to normal brain activity in this frontal cortex, which is reduced in terms of activity in people with depression, and maybe patients will improve. So this physicist, not a physician, a physicist in England, in Sheffield, Anthony Barker invented the first TMS prototype. It was called the Sheffield, from the location, magnet, and was actually already a very small machine, very similar to what we use now, with the idea of simply stimulating very gently on top of the frontal cortex brain activity, like a non-invasive pacemaker to rebalance brain activity there. And it did work. So this was 1985, 40 years ago.
Wow.
Since 1985, more than 20,000 studies on TMS have been published.
Yeah.
So we have tons of knowledge about TMS. We know about the mechanisms, we know about side effects. But what is great about TMS as well, and it's only a few minutes a day, so it's not like taking up all day with people, is that when TMS is done properly by serious places, 80 to 90% of patients improve in terms of symptoms. But it's an improvement, as we have seen with 7,000 of our own patients, that is very different from medications. Patients are more alive. They have a light in their eyes. Many of them say, I've never felt this way my entire life. Families come to us and say, what did you do to him? What did you do to her? Because now they're different. It's not just removing some symptoms with medications. It's bringing these people back to life. They change jobs sometimes. They start new jobs. They start new careers. They have an energy and a love for life that many family members or patients have never seen before. And why is that? Because TMS works in a very different way than medications, right? When I use medications in Italy with my patients, for example, if I use an SSRI, I try to rebalance levels of serotonin, okay? But tons of studies, again, have shown that people with depression have way more than changes in serotonin, right? Many other chemicals and neurotransmitters are changed in people with depression. And what TMS does is way more than just having a chemical effect. Because TMS also releases, when we do the stimulation, serotonin, dopamine, GABA, and this and that. But TMS also has anti-inflammatory effects, for example. Very few people know about that. But inflammation is present in many, even young people that had long COVID, or that have OCD or depression or anxiety or ADD. Anti-inflammatory effects unexpected from TMS. Brain plasticity. TMS creates new brain connections, rewires our brain like we are a supercomputer, and is like an optimizing software that rewires our entire brain.
A new update.
Yes.
iOS 28.
Yeah.
TMS increases brain blood flow and oxygenation. This is why a lot of athletes do TMS before and after games to be faster, sharper, and so on.
Wow.
So TMS does way, way more than what a traditional medication does. And this is why typical question of many people that inquire about TMS is, why would TMS work if medications don't? And the answer is because of TMS has very different mechanisms of action than a traditional medication.
Well, my question is just based on what we know here in the United States for TMS treatment, why is it always a second option? They first want to try medications, that's always the first thing is they want to try that. They don't push TMS first. If we know that it's the leading cause, is that insurance issue or is... Oh, wow.
It's expensive for insurances and for hospitals. And it's time consuming. So it's money, I think.
It's a shame.
But if you think about it, guys, back in the days, certain insurances required 4 medications at maximum doses before they would approve TMS. Now things are changing, luckily. So it's only 2 medications in many cases before they approve TMS. But even the concept of medication-resistant depression is not based on anything. Why do I need to resist medications to do TMS? There's no science behind that.
Oh, wow.
I have a lot of patients, both in Europe and here, that just want to do TMS.
Yeah, of course.
Because they don't want to take medications. Now, I prescribe medications in Italy every time I should because they're cheap, they're fast,
Right.
they take only 30 seconds to patients, right? So they're very convenient, and when they work, God bless, right?
Right.
TMS is expensive compared to medication. It's time consuming because you need to show up every single day for a few weeks. So when medications work, it's okay. But again, we're talking about a minority of this planet. So it should be a choice in this ideal, right, scenario where I can choose between medications or TMS and quickly, as opposed to having to wait.
Yeah.
Have you seen an effect from any other kind of unconventional treatments, if you will, in that you mentioned TMS has anti-inflammatory effects, right? And I think a lot of depression has physiological root causes, whether it be inflammation or a lack of oxygenation, etc. And so as a first line of defense, obviously SSRIs are kind of the standard option, but do you ever explore any other anti-inflammatory remedies with your patients in order to reduce the inflammation in their bodies and help their body function more optimally prior to trying SSRIs?
That's a beautiful idea. Some patients, there have been a lot of studies actually with anti-inflammatories and depression. Mixed results, not so clear. We have patients, for example, that are very careful about their diet, which is very important also to reduce inflammation, like Mediterranean, olive oil and so on, as opposed to McDonald's or other kind of stuff. So we have also seen very natural ways of many patients to try to reduce inflammation. But there's no clear evidence, as far as I know, that any anti-inflammatory medications can actually reduce depression. But the opposite is true. Typical example was COVID. So many people, right after they got the COVID infection, and inflammation is part of what COVID did, an immediate increase of anxiety, depression, OCD, insomnia, brain fog. And there are studies with TMS showing that TMS also works with patients who had long COVID symptoms, including brain fog, like low energy, depression, and so on. So we believe that the anti-inflammatory effect is actually one of the main effects of TMS. We also know that that helps patients with Parkinson's disease, certain types, early stage dementia like Alzheimer's, because inflammation, as you know, beside anxiety, depression, OCD, ADD, and PTSD, inflammation is also the first step for brain cells to die. Inflammation is the prelude in many cases of losing brain cells. So this anti-inflammatory effect of TMS is actually central to many theories on why TMS helps also neurodegenerative diseases. That's why we do it a lot also in Italy, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's.
Yeah. You mentioned neurodegenerative, like depression, anxiety a little bit, but another thing that was really big in your research is addiction and cocaine addiction in particular. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you came across cocaine addiction and how TMS works on someone who's dealing with addiction?
Absolutely. That's the cocaine addiction studies are my baby. So that's my child.
Your baby is cocaine.
My baby is cocaine. I never tried
cocaine,
but it's funny because I never tried it. But anyway,
the point. That was my next question, so thank you.
No, I'm boring. I never smoked. I love a glass of wine. That I do, but like the Italian way, one.
Just one glass of wine?
Not two, because I fall asleep after my first glass.
Okay, perfect.
So you get your dopamine from the motorcycle, huh?
Yes, I do get my dopamine from my motorcycle, that's for sure. But so when I was scientific director at NIDA at the NIH, we had a study. We published a study, and it was a study done in rats that were exposed to cocaine for a couple of months. They could self-administer cocaine if they wanted for a couple of months.
Sounds fun.
Yes, food, cocaine, sleeping, eating, yes. So what we observed, and that there was a group of these rats that became compulsively addicted to cocaine. They kept on seeking and seeking and seeking cocaine. And then what we did was measure their brain activity in the frontal cortex. Why? Because there were already imaging studies in people since many years ago from my previous boss, Dr. Nora Volko, and many, many others, showing that people with a cocaine addiction have a reduction of activity, like people with depression, in this frontal cortex region. Okay. But what we did in rats, we created a proof of concept. We demonstrated live that these chronic cocaine rats who were addicted to cocaine, they could stop self-administering cocaine when we turned on live via very powerful technology invented at Stanford by Carl Deiseroth, who's a genius in neuroscience, by lighting up and turning on back online the frontal cortex of these rats. It's a technology called optogenetics, invented by him and his group in 2004.
Yeah.
So we basically showed that these addicted to cocaine rats stopped seeking for cocaine when we brought back online activity in their frontal cortex. So we had a proof of concept that if we did the same to people, with people, that's why we chose in our first pilot trials back in 2015, 2016, transcranial magnetic stimulation, maybe these people would be like what we observed in
Like
this
the
animal
rats.
model.
Turn back on.
And we started from the most desperate cases of cocaine addiction, people with cocaine and alcohol, suicidal attempts in their past, desperate situations. And we noticed right away, the craziest part was within 5 to 10 sessions, people with 16, 17 years of almost daily cocaine use, within 5 to 10 days, 5 to 10 sessions, all of them started saying, I don't want it anymore. Why was I doing it?
Yeah.
I don't crave it anymore. I don't dream about it anymore.
Yeah.
And the other coolest thing was that most of these patients said, I see other people snorting, drinking, whatever,
Wow.
and it doesn't affect me anymore. So bringing back online this frontal cortex, same brain region stimulated for depression for almost 40 years, was detaching these people from the addiction, cocaine first, then alcohol, then gambling, then cannabis, and so on, and was allowing them to make their own decisions again, as opposed to the addiction changing their decision-making control center, which is the frontal cortex, and pulling them toward, it's okay if I drink more, if I snort a little bit more cocaine. So that Nature paper was the foundation to run all these clinical trials. And in 2020, we published the biggest clinical trial still with TMS and cocaine patients. And that clinical trial, I'm very proud of that, got TMS approved in Europe since 2021 for addictions. So
That's amazing.
Wow.
in Europe,
Congratulations.
the European Medicine Agency has already given the European mark, whatever that thing is called, to use TMS for all addictions, thanks to our work. And they say in the press release. So it's a major achievement.
That
Hopefully
is.
the
Big
FDA is going to do the same soon.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Congratulations
Yeah,
Seriously.
to contribute to that.
Yeah, because TMS became FDA approved for depression in 2008.
Yes.
Which seems like a long time ago, but also it's really not that long ago, So we're making big steps and strides. It was adolescents that recently got FDA approved. OCD recently got FDA approved as well.
Yes.
So steps and strides are happening within the space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, more than 12 million people have used TMS so far. I use TMS on my head.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, who doesn't need TMS, right? Who doesn't have insomnia,
Right.
anxiety, ADD, OCD, depression, some sort of brain fog because of age or something? We'll do TMS. TMS saved my son's life. I have a transgender kid. He's 21 years old. And in high school, he went through very tough time, bullying, violent threats, and so on. So after trying the traditional medications, then he did TMS. And in 6 weeks, changed. No more depression, no more anxiety, no more medications. He was able to taper down all the medications.
Wow.
And he's doing fantastic in college. Just unrecognizable, even in terms of his mood. And we tried the traditional medications, but so we use TMS on us as much as we can.
Yeah.
We also have people like, just to make it a little bit more light, but that are obsessed with longevity.
Yeah.
And because of the brain plasticity, the anti-inflammatory effects, they just come to us in Europe or here to do TMS for having their brain as sharp as it can be at 100% of their decision-making capabilities.
Yeah.
So
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that when you were talking about your child, you were like, we were trying these things, you know, because I think that when you're going through addiction or mental health, it doesn't just affect the individual. It usually affects everyone around them.
Call it a family
Of
disease.
course.
It's a family disease.
It is a family
Yeah,
disease.
it's not just the person. That's what I always tell. Like I've worked in the industry after I got sober and clean for some time, and it's always, you know, even I individually thought like if this is just my problem, but not only was it affecting my family, but I was also affecting like the world, right? Because I wasn't paying taxes, you know, like I wasn't doing anything conducive, and even just like little things like trash on the street, like it really does affect everyone around me because I was just not being a good person. I do have a question with the like cocaine use in itself, because drugs affect different parts of the brain, right?
Yes.
So like heroin is different than cocaine in different aspects because it's affecting different parts for all drugs. Do you think that just like with alcoholism and benzodiazepines, that with TMS itself, it can help all addiction instead, and like specifically if it's like a heroin user like myself who was previously using, that this can also help people who are addicted to other substances aside from cocaine?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And you are touching on something very, very important. From a pharmacological point of view, you're absolutely correct. Heroin, alcohol, nicotine, psychostimulants, cannabis, they work on very different receptors
Right.
and different neurotransmitters. Even non-chemical addictions, gambling, internet, video games, sex, food, right?
Yeah.
Very different mechanisms of action, but somehow, and nobody has the answer to this,
Right.
they all converge on the same brain regions being affected by them. They all end up, there are
there.
beautiful studies on pathological gambling. Gambling is not a substance,
Right.
but the frontal cortex of gamblers is very similar to the frontal cortex of people who have cocaine addiction, reduction of activity in our most important brain region, the decision-making control center. So somehow, even the simplest molecule like alcohol or cocaine, they are so intelligent that they can rewire our entire brain
Wow.
and get exactly to the most important part. I now think that I am deciding that I want to gamble my entire salary, as we have patients, in 2 days. These are not rich people in many cases. And it makes me believe that that is what I want to do.
Right.
Because gambling goes straight to my frontal cortex and changes it. Or alcohol, or cocaine. How these very different, chemically speaking, structurally molecules or addictions get to the same endpoint,
Same part.
nobody knows.
Wow.
Yeah.
But they affect pharmacologically different brain regions in different ways. But what they all have in common, every chemical addiction, and we published that and many others many years ago, they all start by changing dopamine, which is a learning molecule, but is maladaptive learning. I learn that I like this behavior, my cocaine, my alcohol, my nicotine, whatever. And they affect this limbic system, our emotional system, which is a constellation of brain regions. And somehow they all end up doing the same things, making me believe that I'm making my own decisions, but it's my addiction then. Through the frontal cortex and through other brain regions.
Right.
Yeah, we were talking about it yesterday, Kyla and I, just coping mechanisms as a whole. And it seems like all these things that we're talking about, they're ways to cope with just like life stressors and be able to funnel it into one area. It's interesting, but it almost makes sense. I'm like, you need an outlet. Just make sure that it's a healthy outlet. And if it isn't, it usually is an unhealthy outlet, whether it's like addiction or like finding, space in food. But that's really fascinating to see and to know.
Yeah, there's so many different indications you've listed throughout the conversation, whether it be neurodegeneration, addiction, depression, etc. I'm curious, and all of them, although they're affecting different receptors, are leading to the prefrontal cortex. Do you ever leverage the fMRI scan to have more granularity in which regions of the brain you're targeting with the device?
So this is a great question. There is actually this beautiful work done at Stanford. For example, with fMRI, they have developed for depression a protocol called SAINT, and it stands for Stanford Accelerated Intelligent Neuromodulation Treatment, something like that. And this is 5 days for people with severe depression, 10 TMS stimulations per day. And they do fMRI scans before and after.
And that's the accelerated TMS, right?
Correct, the
Yeah.
accelerated TMS. That is useful to a point. For example, we have success rate 80 to 90% with our patients with addictions, depressions, anxiety, and so on. So we try to also make it very efficient and non-expensive as much as we can for patients. There is no data yet, as far as I know, that if I do MRIs, fMRIs, QEEG to all my patients, for example, and before and after, that would change the outcome. This is where we will be in a few years, right? EEG, QEEG, fMRI-guided TMS for everything. But so far, I haven't seen evidence that if we go to the traditional brain regions that we stimulate, for example, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex for depression or addiction, or another brain region is called supplementary motor area, which is modulated with anxiety, OCD, ADD, PTSD, insomnia. I haven't seen data yet that says if we added this extra piece of information, our success rate would significantly improve. Eventually, it's going to happen. And this is a very useful approach for patients that, for example, for the 10% or so that does not respond to TMS, right? So we will be there eventually. And I'm sure this is where progress goes. EEG, QEEG, fMRI-guided TMS. For now, with the exception of this beautiful Stanford accelerated protocol, which is done residentially in a hospital setting, the rest, I haven't seen yet evidence that leads to higher success. So we try to keep it simpler, faster, more economical, less expensive for patients as well.
And some people, the accelerated protocol is interesting because it's 10 sessions a day and it's every hour. So it's literally like, I mean, a full day of work, full week of work, really. Are you seeing the same results with the same protocol as you're seeing with the traditional TMS that's usually over 6 weeks and you're doing it for just 30 minutes a day?
Yes, we do actually a mix of different treatments. It gets super personalized to every patient. Some of our patients, for example, for depression, do 2-3 stimulations per day. It's like a mini accelerated Stanford protocol. Some other patients do it only once a day because they don't have time. It depends, guys, really on the severity of the patients, on how fast they need to improve. But in many cases, even when we just do one stimulation a day, for example, for depression, and patients begin to change after 5 days or 10 sessions, and these are patients maybe that had depression for 10, 20 years, sometimes it's kind of confusing to change so quickly. I had depression for 20 years. Now I changed in 5 days. I'm beginning to see changes. And many of them say, I don't know what's going on with me. It's a little bit...
It's like imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Exactly. So sometimes in many patients, we see benefit in not going too fast. But these are very different patients from the ones that go to Stanford, right?
Yeah.
In gently holding their hand, so to speak, to changing, as opposed to so quickly I go from depression to nothing in 5 days. Some patients would be very confused about that. So there is merit in both, in also gently taking people out of anxiety, depression, or addictions in at a slower pace, basically.
That makes sense. Yeah, when I learned about TMS, I was like, why the hell isn't everyone trying? Why is this a first line defense? Because your brain is both electrical and chemical. It's going to fire, release chemicals. So if it's firing improperly, why would you not treat the firing of the actual neurons rather than the releasing of the chemicals? And what I think is really fascinating about TMS is you go through these 36 sessions and you could potentially go back or you could pop in, but after the sessions, you're good to go. It's not like you're on medicines. Do you see a lot of your patients coming in taking depression medication or anxiety medication and then tapering off and no longer needing medication? What does that usually look like for a patient?
It's all over.
Okay.
We have patients that clearly have an agenda. They say to my medical directors here, I want to get rid of medications as fast as possible, and they work with our physicians to taper them down. We have patients who feel more comfortable in keeping some medications just even when they finish the TMS. We see all sorts of range, but most patients, they love to reduce their medications as much as they can. So that's the majority of patients, absolutely.
One thing that you mentioned that I think says a lot about your approach in treatment is that you mentioned the orientation of the patient in regards to the treatment, right? So whether or not they want to get off of antidepressants or whether they want to taper off of them. And I think being oriented towards the patient's objectives is ultimately why you have such a high success rate as well. Can you speak to a little bit about when the patient comes in with a strong passion or idea of what they're looking to achieve, how does that affect the effectiveness of the treatment ultimately?
That's a super smart question. It does affect it. They have done many studies showing that treatment seekers, right, the motivated, have a much higher placebo effect. So these are the patients that initially have both the real effect of TMS and the placebo effect. And placebo, just for everyone to be on the same page, is a chemical effect. It's release of many different chemicals. Physicians can have a placebo effect on patients. Don't worry, you will feel better after this. We use the placebo effect, right? It's for a benefit of the patient as much as we can. So initially, the treatment seekers do fare faster and better, the majority of them. But then, within a couple of weeks, the placebo effect would be gone anyway, and the real effects keep on kicking in.
That's great.
The non-treatment seekers are also usually benefiting from TMS. They are brought by their families, by a loved one. But the ones that do not respond to TMS are, for example, people with secondary gain. Let's say I am depressed and my wife, my child, my family just wraps around me. I feel very kind of cozy in this, lots of attention toward me. And I won't get better with TMS because if I become completely independent, I am depression-free, who's going to pay attention to me, right?
Ooh,
So we have also some of those that at the end of the day, if they lose their symptoms, they lose lots of attention. So these are the toughest patients because it's not conscious in many cases, but if I'm doing great, I got to go back to work. Nobody's going to pay attention to me anymore.
Right.
What am I going to do? Now I got to
Yeah.
wake up. So we also see, sadly, again, unconsciously, but a few of those.
Yeah.
And that's something that I imagine would be remedied with the conjunction of psychotherapy in addition to that.
100%.
Yeah, you need someone to motivate you along in that
Talk
regard.
about
need a
this.
mental health professional.
Yeah.
Help this
Interesting.
person.
Interesting.
So we obviously briefly touched upon cocaine. What are your thoughts on the epidemic right now with like fentanyl in cocaine? And are you seeing that in the clinic right now?
We still see, so the majority of what we see is cocaine, alcohol, cannabis, and gambling.
Okay.
These four groups. Fentanyl, we don't see many of them. There have been TMS studies, really good studies, showing that even cravings for opioids with TMS, same protocols that we developed, are reduced very significantly. But we don't see many of them. We see very few. Those are, in our experience, both in Europe and here, the toughest patients. My physicians, they make sure that they take no chances while they do TMS with overdoses. So usually those patients also take medications like naltrexone, for example, opioid antagonists, very, very tough cases. But what many people don't know is that even when they smoke cannabis, sometimes cannabis is laced with fentanyl, right? So they don't go for fentanyl,
Right.
but they get it, not intentionally. But to be honest, we don't see many of those. The vast majority, cocaine, alcohol, cannabis, and gambling, they spontaneously come to us. Still, we don't see many. In Europe, I've seen one, but Europe doesn't have
An opioid epidemic, right?
Absolutely not.
Right. It's
They're a
here.
little bit more regulated.
I've never prescribed one in my life to my patients, nor I had one patient in Italy in 30 years ever ask me for an opioid for pain.
Wow.
Never.
Yeah.
And I
Never.
think that has a majority to do with just how the United States and the big pharma, just the pushing of the medications with
very different
opioids and like,
environment.
I mean, that just what happened with Purdue Pharmacy, for example.
Yeah.
They said it was non-addictive. They literally said it was non-addictive, and that's how I started originally. Was I was given pain medications after a surgery when I was like 16, after like a major surgery. I was 16, you know what I mean? And I remember taking it, and my family obviously has like a history of addiction, alcoholism, severe trauma, and I just remember the feeling of it, and I was like, this is exactly what I've been looking for. You know, like the feeling took away all those issues. I probably had other mental health issues. Sure I did. But that feeling initially, and I was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to find more of this. And I did. And it led like a destructive path, of course. But now what I'm seeing, just even like in the rehabs, like I've worked in treatment centers for a long time, people don't know that the substances that they're using are all cut with the fentanyl. So they don't know that they're addicted to it. And then they get severely sick. They're in withdrawals and they're like, this is just cocaine.
Just smoked a doobie.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I'm just sitting here for THC
terrible.
and like it's devastating, and it's really concerning because they also, like, I just had somebody recently, their 14-year-old daughter smoked marijuana, was laced with fentanyl, and she died. She passed away. Yeah. It just out of nowhere, like her for just experimenting, right? Just dabbling, not a serious addict, not anything like that, and just passed. And it's mind blowing. It's so scary.
It is.
Yeah.
I think there are like several obvious cultural differences between the United States and Europe as to why, you know, fentanyl might be more pervasive here. But I'm curious, in your eyes, being from Italy and having practices out there, what are the primary socio-cultural differences that you observe in terms of whether it be mental health or addiction, as it relates to your practice in TMS specifically?
So what I notice is that European patients are more patient in terms of the expectation on how fast TMS would work. So they tend in general to be, because I don't know if it's a Catholic culture, whatever it is, like I want to suffer, but in general, it's easier to explain, look, this may take time.
Right.
While in this culture, we are more used to, I want everything fast.
Now.
That is the only difference in general.
Yeah.
In terms of education, I'm surprised by how many people know already about TMS before they call us. We talk for free to everybody who wants to learn about TMS. It's our policy, free education for everyone, right?
Wow.
But 90% of the patients that call when they want to use TMS, when they want to do TMS, whether it's here or in Italy, they already know a lot about TMS. So it's getting there. Cultural differences. The doses of medications that I use in Italy are on average 2 to 3 times lower than what I see by physicians here in the United States.
Wow.
I don't know if that's a cultural thing, but in general, I stay super low, and I can, and patients don't want more there. But I don't practice here, so I don't know if it's just my observation by seeing. So a few differences there.
Yeah.
But what I noticed, which I didn't know until we opened our TMS clinics here, is that there is no difference in terms of outcome of TMS. Because we started in Italy. We had about 3,000 patients in Italy before opening in the US.
Wow.
All socioeconomical status, intellectual, IQ, whatever, jobs. But they all said the same things after TMS. Then when we open here, we are actually seeing the same. It doesn't matter race, gender, ethnicity, age, culture. After TMS, everyone tends to say the same things.
That's great.
So, which is scary in a sense. How can you do these very tiny things for a few minutes a day, and everybody is repeating the same things, how they feel, what they do. So really TMS cuts across age, gender, culture, ethnicity, which is incredible, right? Because you know, you may see differences, but we actually don't.
Interesting.
Fascinating.
The results are universal, but the indications might be a little cultural, socially influenced.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, because I know that you were just in Asia for a little while, and then we talked very briefly about potentially opening up something in Brazil, or at least exploring that. As you're looking now, like different continents, because I mean it's Europe, Asia, North America, South America. Do you see any differences, like country to country, as far as like, do you see the Asian population like facing certain like conditions versus like America versus Europe?
God, we are very similar.
Okay.
Very similar. I have friends who run some top universities in Shanghai, for example, or in Japan. very similar needs. England, France, Switzerland is a little bit different. We probably will open Switzerland fairly soon. They're more tuned to mental wellness. They don't talk as much so far, with my small experience, about pathologies. This is where most clinics that have approached us in Switzerland want to talk about. They're not asking us to bring TMS, for example, in Switzerland, for diseases, more for mental wellness, right?
Wow.
Anti-aging and so on. But again, just my experience. But in general, all our kind of European kind of cultures, including Asia, we are all very similar. Same diseases, same issues.
That's fascinating. I lived in China for 2 years. I lived in Shanghai, actually.
Oh, yes, beautiful.
And everything was in the like public sector. It's in like hospitals.
Yes.
Where here in the United States, it's a lot private. Yes. And you have insurance coverage majority throughout the U.S., at least for depression, OCD a little bit there. Do you see a difference in between owning like private clinics versus like these entities that are public in different countries?
Absolutely, yes. In Italy, there are very few hospitals that actually offer already TMS for free. And there are 3 regions. Italy is divided, for example, in 20 different regions. 3 of them offer TMS for free to all patients with mental health problems. And 1 region at the edge of France is called Aosta. They just a few weeks ago approved TMS for everything related to mental health.
Wow,
just a few weeks ago for free. But it's spots. In Italy, you rely way more on the public system because usually it's better than the private.
Right.
In Shanghai, for example, at the Shanghai Mental Health Hospital, they have tons of TMS machines. And they do it in a very systematic way. They do beautiful clinical trials now. So things are changing in Asia as well. I don't know about South Korea, which has a huge problem with especially young people, but nobody has ever talked about TMS with me there. I don't know, but people in general, all over the world, I see through the Clinical TMS Society, through meetings, they are getting more and more aware about TMS. Also because of, if you think of medications, like look at the data, how many new medications have been created for depression, for example, over the last, in terms of new molecular structure, in the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah, there was one that just was recently FDA approved, but since then it's been like 20, 30 years, right?
Exactly. So
Auvelity?
People want more.
Yeah.
People want more, and they're looking into what else is out there. So, and they read more, which is good, despite the confusion that social media can create sometimes.
And then here in the United States, you have to have treatment-resistant depression. So it means that you fail 2 antidepressants, and then you'd be qualified. Is that similar elsewhere in the world, or is that just here in the United States? Like, is it a first-line defense in other areas, or is it second line everywhere?
It's just here in the United States.
Really?
Like in Italy, if you get access to certain hospitals who have TMS, you can actually do TMS for depression. And in those 3 regions, also for addictions. But it's the insurance system is very unique
to the United States.
Yeah. As far as I know, yes.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, I wish that you could just roll up to a hospital and just be like,
I need some TMS.
Tap it out.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Wow. I guess.
Super fascinating. You also mentioned that like athletes will do it as preventative medicine. Like, what exactly is it doing for the athletes? Obviously, you mentioned the anti-inflammatory effects and the oxygenation, etc. But why is it that people that maybe aren't ailed with a mental health condition are still seeking TMS out?
First of all, because probably everyone may have a little bit of trouble sleeping, let's say, before, or a little bit of anxiety, performance anxiety. So usually there's always something to improve, right? Even if I am an athlete with no clinical depression or clinical anxiety, but I may get anxious the day before or the morning of my game. But second, there is some data, which is very cool as well, that, for example, stimulation of this frontal cortex part increases working memory. So even positive non-pathology related effects of TMS have been described. And then you have some of them saying, look, I run faster. I concentrate more. I can focus more. So again, we don't know. Are we removing something? Like little bit of ADD or anxiety, or is it a real improvement above? The only changes that some people say and swear by is in the creativity domain. Like, yes.
Really?
But it's very random, okay? I don't have a lot of real data.
Anecdotal.
That's so fascinating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anecdotal. But
Yeah.
like we had a person, I want to stay super confidential, a person that was creating an album, and this gentleman tried to finish this album for 19 months, and then he did TMS for a lot of reasons. And after TMS in 3 weeks, he completed it. So he saw a massive acceleration of creativity. He said, but is it just creativity? Is it efficiency?
Right.
I can concentrate. We
know.
don't know.
Yeah. I think it's like a tune-up for the brain. Like if you think about it, your neurons are firing and maybe they're not firing as fast or as well. Like maybe you've been traveling a lot and you've lost some sleep and you just need to like, you know, get your brain tuned up. It could be something that you kind of just plug in. But I think with the space, the research is always tied to like mental health or like treatment resistant or like OCD, and there's not like funding to study like let's do creativity and TMS and see how it affects it.
Correct.
But in hopes that this is, you know, more the beginning phases as we look at antidepressants and like the progression that's happened there, and it seems like it's flatlined almost a bit, where with these new innovative modalities, like the world's really your oyster. You have like so many different things that you could be treating, which is so cool.
Yes.
Different parts of the brain. Is it like?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So it's it will expand. It will keep on expanding. And so far, if you look at the data, percentage of success, again, from the super reputable universities and places that do real science with TMS, success rate is much higher than I would say most medications
Yeah.
with these diseases, if not of all medications that we have available so far. So TMS will keep on expanding. Accelerated protocols are going to be crucial. That is still the issue for many people, because not many people can spend 6 weeks
Right.
showing up every day, right? So TMS is very location dependent. If I live 2 hours away from a TMS clinic, it's going to be impossible. So hopefully more and more accelerated protocols for addictions.
Yeah.
We hope to have them in the future for anxiety, for example, for OCD. But so far, only accelerated for depression, which is probably a limit, like a physical limit for many people to have access to TMS.
Yeah. This is a really nerdy question, but you have TMS, so it's Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation, then you have TDCS. There's some device companies that are out there utilizing TDCS as a maintenance program. Do you feel like that? And then I know that there's some TDCS devices that you could bring home, or it's more transportable.
Yes.
Do you feel like there's ever a world where like smaller devices could be brought home and then you could have even like a broader access to care? Or do you think it will always have to be in a clinic with like these, you know, bigger devices?
No. Someday we will have portable TMS devices. We are not there yet because of science is not there yet.
Yeah.
TDCS has a lot of science behind it, especially South America, Argentina, Brazil. They've done beautiful studies with TDCS as well. As far as I know, not as efficient, not as precise, because TDCS is just more of a broad electrical stimulation. But I know of kids that are buying on Amazon some TDCS
They're
devices
trying to like biohack
to improve
themselves.
Yeah. It's
Danny
kind
would
of
do
a
that.
pacemaker
He's in the corner
versus
just
stimulating a little
I
bit
just
of
got
everything.
I just got my hydrogen water bottle.
There you
Oh,
go.
cool.
And now I
there you
just
go.
need my little Amazon TDCS machine.
Yeah. Just stimmy out in the corner.
Yeah.
But yeah, some people combine them. I mean, TMS has still this advantage of being so precise, so data-based that it is why patients love that first.
Yeah.
But TDCS also has some really cool studies on it.
Yeah, I did some research at UCLA. We published on memory recall, and it really worked. It was short-term memory recall, but TDCS to like see it in real time, it worked.
Yes.
So it was really cool to see. But there's like no long-term studies on, you know, short-term memory recall. But like even kids like, you know, studying for tests, like pop that little TDCS on. And, Biohack your way to success.
Everybody in the classroom.
Yeah.
We're about to take a test. Get them.
What is Sarah doing? How is she so successful?
Tapping
Very
herself.
cool.
She's timing herself into an A+.
Very cool.
So, Dr. Bonci, obviously, you're one of the world's leading neurologists, specifically in this field. You have many of clinics. For someone who might be listening to this that could be struggling with addiction, depression, anxiety even, and is maybe a little trepidatious or hesitant to explore TMS, they see it as a modern day lobotomy. It's a bit of intimidating visual to see the machine, etc. What would you tell that person who, has maybe tried some alternative treatments and is struggling to get by?
Right. I would tell them to call us because we are free. At least one thing that is free is education about TMS. We spend up to an hour or whatever a person takes to and teach them about TMS. I do it personally as much as I can. Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
That's amazing that you still make time to do that.
I have 3 today. I have every day 3 to 4 hours of teaching people
Wow.
about TMS. I just explain them about TMS. Many of these patients cannot come to one of our locations because of geography, right? Because they're too far.
Right.
I just try to guide them on how to discriminate between really good TMS clinics as well and not so by asking certain questions. So I try to guide people and teach people. This is my personal mission, actually.
Yeah.
This is my baby.
Yeah, that's
now.
almost like above your pay grade to be teaching people about TMS, so it has to be a passion.
I love it. I love it. But I have a team as well, so it's always free. That education, there's a bunch of us in my clinics that we're always available, and we schedule people within a few days at the most, and we just share articles, information about TMS with all of them, and we do it family by family. And this is the part that I love the most, actually, because at least it's free and they can take it or leave it, but at least they have information as opposed to how do I go on Google and guess what's garbage and what's real, right? But there's a lot of science behind TMS, and we share that science with them. So that's my personal mission, and that's what I do half of my days. Yeah.
That's incredible. So if you're feeling hesitant about TMS, Dr. Bonci's number is... I'm just kidding.
Yeah, seriously.
They can find me on the web everywhere. I'm everywhere. Yes.
And then you're a co-founder at GM Mental Health. You all have locations in California, Chicago, Florida, Europe as well, hopefully soon to be in other areas. But what makes your clinic different?
It's what makes every top clinic different. It's knowledge, and experience, and training, and precision, and professionality, right? So I just want to make one example so that everybody can understand this. TMS is a machine, but there's actually 2 machines in many cases. There is the TMS machine, and with the type of machines that we use, for example, here in LA, there is a navigation system. The navigation system is not something that you have to buy, but we do, and it's very expensive. Navigation system guides the precise location on where the stimulation has to be placed. Studies have shown, science has shown that if you don't have a navigation system, with these machines, 50% of the time you are off target. If you are off target, success rate decreases. Patients don't know that, right?
Yeah.
But we tell them.
And that's the mapping session.
That is the mapping session. But that is done every single session, every single day. Because absolutely. Every day you have to place the machine in the right location. And every day you come in and you just sit there for 5 minutes, and our techs place the machine correctly with the navigation system. We train our technicians for weeks until we are happy. But technically, the certificate of accomplishment to become a TMS technician is given within a few hours. But our technicians cannot touch patients for weeks. Only if and when we are happy with them.
Gotcha.
We have a neurosurgeon, Dr. Moreno, who's the clinical director of our TMS clinics in the US. He's a neurosurgeon. He obsessively triple checks the brain coordinates that you need to put into the machines in order to tell the machine where to go for anxiety, OCD, addiction, PTSD, blah, blah, blah. But we have a neurosurgeon doing that beside my medical directors. So we are very OCD.
You're top notch there.
But this is what makes Stanford, Mayo, Harvard, UCSF, UCLA, top places different from
other
random
clinic.
place where
Yeah.
you have no idea how they do TMS.
Yeah, and I think
right?
that the mapping is really important because most traditional TMS treatments are usually one mapping at the beginning of the session, then you go through 36 sessions.
Yeah.
Versus if you're mapping every day, it's a way more precise treatment.
You have to. Every single day, precise location. Mapping also, I want to clarify this for everybody who's
Please.
listening. Brain mapping, which is done initially when people start TMS, is also a misleading word. Brain mapping usually is, on the first TMS session, finding the right intensity of stimulation for that patient. Because if I do TMS, I need maybe, there's a rotary dial on these machines, 30% of intensity. You may need 40%.
Right.
Mapping is what is the correct intensity of stimulation for every single individual.
Right.
It's not mapping the brain of people, but every day, once the team has achieved what is the right intensity of stimulation for a patient, we need to find the right location for the person, which is,
Right.
if you want to call
Okay,
you
got
can
it.
call it brain mapping, but
Okay.
Yeah.
but a lot of people say, do I need a brain scan? Some people bring their brain scans,
The fMRIs.
the fMRIs, the MRI, the QEG, but they're not necessary. But if we have them, we can insert, for example, the MRI brain coordinates of a patient, and that is also something else that we can do. But there's a lot of confusion. People say, okay, are they going to map my entire brain?
Right.
They're simply finding the right intensity
Yeah.
of stimulation to induce action potentials,
Yeah.
as you know, which is the basic unit of brain activity.
Yeah, to fire off those neurons. So it's the motor threshold, they call it, right?
Correct. The motor threshold.
Well,
Yeah.
I tried the TMS for the first time, and they were like, "Do you want to feel it?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's feel it." So they turned it all the way up, and it like superseded my motor threshold.
Oh, really?
My eyes almost rolled to the back of my head.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
No,
It
no,
is
no. We don't
almost-
do that. No.
I mean, it made great content. Yeah.
Whoa, no,
That's what we're here for.
No, we're very gentle.
Yeah, no. It's usually, it shouldn't be like that. But yeah, really super fascinating stuff.
Do you want to talk about the side effects?
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to ask us about the
Yes.
side effects. That's the most common thing. A
ECT.
question, yeah, is that there sometimes when I speak to people, because as a care coordinator, I'm like trying to educate, just like bring information, insurance, all of that, and they're like, "Well, what's the main side effects?" And is it electric convulsion? Shock therapy? And I'm like, no, it's not. It's non-invasive, but that's a very common thing because people use different machines. Clinics use different machines. Different machines do deep TMS. There's all different kinds, and so certain clinics will use different ones. There was one clinic I worked with who did the deep TMS,
Yeah.
and they turned that all the way up on you, and like people were complaining of headaches, right, because it was too intense. So, what are some of the most common side effects that you often hear with most people?
I can only speak for our side effects.
Of course,
Yeah,
of course.
Because again, TMS is like a surgery. But headache is the most common.
Okay.
About 10% of people. I had a headache once or twice initially, probably related to the vasodilation
Right.
that we create when we do TMS. They're usually once or twice, only initially.
Yeah.
Then some people feel discomfort, this kind of electric AAA battery kind of feeling on their forehead when they do the frontal cortex protocol. Like the super anxious people, sometimes they feel a little bit dizzy initially or more anxious because, oh my God, what's happening to me? And that usually also subsides. And those are usually our side effects.
Yeah.
That's all we see.
Which is so much more less than like medications, which
Weight
is
gain, low libido.
Right.
I mean, the list goes on and on.
yeah.
So that's the story.
Yeah. Last question. Electroconvulsive therapy versus TMS. There's
Right.
so much confusion. Like whenever we're working with clients, we always write that as like a blog topic because that is like the most asked question.
Right. It's like, so the comparison I use is like using a defibrillator like in those ER movies
Yeah.
versus a pacemaker.
Right.
Basically a pacemaker.
Very
person.
different.
So, yeah. Clear. Exactly. ECT is done like under anesthesia, Hopkins, top places and so on. But you are under anesthesia in a clinical setting and they give a supramaximal stimulation in terms of very high electricity intensity.
Right.
So that is kind of a major reset way above inducing action potentials, major electric current stimulation in your brain to try and scramble all synapses and reset everything. This is why one of the major side effects of ECT in many people is like this memory
Right.
loss, right? Which may take a few months to recover. TMS is this very gentle, just eliciting your action potentials, rewiring, rebalancing your brain frequency, releasing your neurotransmitters, blah, blah, blah. So it's really a much smaller intensity, much lower intensity of stimulation. Like if I had a non-invasive pacemaker and try to just rebalance my heartbeat. So very, very different intensities and very different side effects. Actually, I was having a conversation with the ECT head of Sinai in Miami, and super smart psychiatrist, and he said, Anto, why don't we try and combine in a study ECT with TMS to minimize in certain special patients the side effects of ECT by tuning them down, because TMS actually has pro-memory, working memory and so on effect. So that may be a study in the future that we're going to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of negative rap around ECT, but it's actually, they say it's one of the most effective treatments for depression. And I was at a conference and they talked about treating acute SI, suicidal ideation, and ECT is actually really good for treating acute SI. But I think that there's just negative press around like one flew of the cuckoo's nest.
Like, like that's due to Hollywood, right? Like
conversion therapy. You know,
it's really due to like all that. I mean, and it's visually like it's not the prettiest either, you know. So I think that's why there's a lot of negative and that's even with just patients in the United States that I speak to directly. That's all they've seen or know. There's a lack of knowing or education, so they just are assuming they haven't done their own research. But that's interesting.
Lobotomy,
the frontal lobotomy.
Oh my God, how the
Exactly. No,
we're on two different sides of the fence here, guys.
Things have changed.
Things have changed a lot.
Thank God.
But yeah, this was such a great conversation. Thank you so much for breaking down TMS.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bonci.
Giving us a full download.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Same great questions.
And if anyone needs TMS out there, reach out to Gia. We'll have all the links below. And if you're looking for help with your mental health, that's what we do here at Cycle Health. We try to connect individuals to clinics like Gia and like providers like Dr. Bonci, who really can give you the best advice. I think it's really difficult sometimes to find where to start, and Cycle Health is here to help you get that start. So speaking to care coordinators like Kyla or anyone on the rest of our team to connect you to the care that you need. So if you need help, hit us up and we're here to help.
Let's break some cycles.
Yes.
Cool.
Amen. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, of
thank
course,
you.
Of course.
Thank you, Dr. Bonci.
Thank you.
Thank you.